to the latest episode of Thinking Solo podcast, where we talk about strategies to succeed in business and in life as an individual. I'm Ryan Derousseau, and I'm here today with Elaine Pofeldt, who I have known Elaine for a long, long time. She's a writer like I was a writer, and we first met in Fortune Small Business. And in the years since, she's been sort of an inspiration, a mentor. Elaine is the author of multiple books, Tiny Business, Big Money, as well as The $1 Million One Person Business. And she's written for a number of business publications, Fortune, Money, CNBC, Inc., et cetera. It goes on and on. And she's really a voice speaking about solopreneurs, both in terms of how to build business, in terms of how to build larger businesses, and kind of tracking the momentum that we see in this space. And so she's a really interesting person to talk to on that front. And I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's so great to be back together talking about small business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very full circle in that sense, because that's kind of how we met. And I don't even know if I've ever told you that, but you have always been sort of a very much like, what is Elaine doing? I need to follow her guide in this because she is succeeding so well in the freelance contract writing world, which is not an easy one to succeed in. So,
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much for saying that.
yeah, absolutely. So Elaine, I mean, just in terms of like giving us and our listeners kind of background on this, like tell us about sort of who you are and like kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a freelance journalist and author, and I started my solo business in 2007. I have four children who were little. Well, three of them were little at the time, and then I had another one. Now, three of them are in college, and my son is 15. So we've gone through several life stages along the way. But I started the business to have flexibility, and it's given me that gift, and it's also brought some amazing people into my life, included.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that flexibility because I think that's a big thing that people, when they want to go out on their own, they're like, oh, I really want the flexibility to be my own boss and set my own hours and that sort of thing. But in reality, when we first start, my guess is it's not nearly as flexible as you think because you're just trying to make a paycheck. And then at some point, it becomes more and more flexible over time. So I guess when did you feel, one, comfortable in what you were doing, but also with the ability to truly set your own hours and even take breaks in the middle of the day if you wanted to?
I don't think you ever feel totally comfortable as a freelancer because you eat what you kill. So there's always the next hunt, and you can have recurring clients. I think once you get to the point where you're going from doing one-off jobs to having some recurring clients or retainer clients, you start to have a little more confidence that you can take time off. I mean, I always allowed time for breaks. When my kids were little, we'd go to the park at lunchtime and stay for an hour and a half instead of an hour, as I did when I had my work from home arrangement. Um, but you do have to be disciplined, and you have to be constantly toggling between doing the actual work of the business development, and getting new clients. And that requires some planning and foresight and time management. But for me, it was always worth it. I think it's important to think about the trade offs. What do you want? And I always said, I really enjoyed being home in the house with my children, but also working full time and at a high level. And for me, running my business was a solution that allowed that. And it really saw me all the way through. And it will. My son will be graduating from high school in 2 years. And I think, wow, what a beautiful gift it was, because I really got to be there for so many of the important moments in my children's life. And I got to work with great people, do really interesting projects. And the only trade-off was I had to stay on top of the business, and I had to understand things like money and cash flow in order to make that happen. But it was well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language of money and cash flow. In terms of that level, like how long did it take for you to kind of get your hands around that sort of dynamic?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't really know what to expect. I had hired a lot of freelancers, but I wasn't a freelancer. So I was getting my sea legs. And I remember the first 3 months, I started it in October 2007, which as a financial professional, you realize that was not the best time to be starting a business. But I did start it then. And then everything in the economy fell off a cliff. And the first 3 months, I only got three assignments. I didn't really know how to market myself. So I just started telling other freelancers that I was freelancing. And luckily, a couple of them introduced me to some people that needed writers. And then it was like January of 2008 that I started to have a full plate. And I realized I had started the business at the end of the budget year and everybody was running out of budget. So in January, the budgets were replenished. And then I was basically filled up for the whole rest of my career. It just seemed like once you start doing a good job for people, it makes their life easier. So then they'll hire you again as long as they have the budget. Now, things would dry up sometimes. I branched out into content marketing, and sometimes that work would come from venture-backed companies, and then their funding would dry up, and then you had a great relationship, but they had no more funds. So you have to be resilient. You have to always be attuned to what's going on and think a few steps ahead, not be overly dependent on any one client. And I learned these things mostly the hard way, but I did learn them in the end. And I think that's part of the fun and adventure of running a business. But that's where what you teach comes into play because if you're going to make this work, you also have to be smart about your personal finances and live a little below your means so that you can build the cushion that allows you if the client suddenly dries up. You're not getting severance pay, even if you've had a contract for 15 years,
Yeah.
it's over. So you need to know what you're going to do next and not figure it out then, but figure it out ahead of time and have it already lined up.
Yeah, 2 things on that front. 2 things that I really talk to people a lot about is the lower you can keep expenses on the personal side, the more chance your business has to succeed. Because if you are keeping expenses lower, at least at the beginning, then you don't have to make nearly as much before you're seeing profits. And that's going to really drive further investment in the business, whatever sort of that business is. And then the other thing is to pay yourself a salary just as if you have like a full-time job. So when you have really, really good years, like you're still paying yourself the right amount, and then once you have a strong emergency fund, sure, you can start giving yourself bonuses and stuff like that, but treating it yourself like, a salaried employee is gonna be really important to particularly in those early years.
I agree with you. And one smart practice that people can embrace is running payroll early on just for themselves, because what trips people up a lot of times is putting aside the money to pay their taxes. And then at the end of the year, all of a sudden they have this huge tax bill and they're like, oh, freelancing isn't working. It would have been working if you were putting aside the money, but life being what it is in America today, everything is so costly that it's so easy to say, oh, I'll put it aside next month. And then all of a sudden it creeps up on you. So if you're running payroll, you're getting some taxes taken out. And that way you probably won't have a big tax bill at the end if you've taken out the correct amount. It does cost money to run payroll, but you can do it once a month instead of every 2 weeks, and here and there take some distributions as well. But I think that works really well. And now there are some platforms that allow that and make it easy.
Yep. Yeah, and, I mean, honestly, one of my, because I do taxes sometimes for individuals, and it'll be the first year that they're, like, succeeding, right? And they'll be like, "I had this great year," and then I have to be like, "Well, congratulations, you also owe a lot of taxes because you didn't put anything in." And my comment to them is basically like, "Welcome to the club." Because we've all been through that, because you're always surprised by that first year of success how much actually needs to go to taxes, but it is a learning lesson because then you hopefully do not let that happen again moving forward.
Well, you're so right about that, Ryan. One thing that you have to become as a freelancer, and this is sort of unexpected, is a student of tax law and tax deductions and tax breaks. So you can have educated conversations with your financial planner. For instance, if you're sending your kids to camp, you need certain receipts. There might be things that you don't even realize are tax deductions, or if you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but this year, if you're spending more than 8.5% of your income on health insurance, say you're paying the premiums plus some added costs for things out of pocket, that's a tax deduction. So you really need to be a hawk about those things because that reduces your taxable income. You're taxed on your profits. So you want to lower your profits honestly so that you're not paying more taxes than you actually owe. But your accountant won't know those things unless you speak to them about it and tell them.
Absolutely. And you have to pay taxes, but you also the reason there's a tax law and the reason it's like that big is because there are incentives within that, and Congress has said these are the incentives you have, so you don't have to pay more taxes than you certainly need to pay. And so that's sort of something like as an employee you don't necessarily think about, but as an employer, which you are now, if you're a solo person, then you need to. I am curious though, because not only are you, a solo entrepreneur, but you speak to a ton of solo entrepreneurs, and you talked a little bit about that flexibility side of things, and that's the reason you went out on your own. I mean, is that one of the most common reasons that you hear, or what are the other reasons that people really pursue this lifestyle in your experience?
It's freedom overall.
Yeah,
If there was one word that described it, people want freedom for different reasons at different stages of life. Some people are just very independent. They don't like working in a corporate environment, or they don't like how corporate life is today and how dispensable employees are. You have people that are young parents that don't want to miss certain moments with their kids, kind of my motivation at the time when I started. Then you have people that are sort of nearing the end of the period where they feel secure in corporate America, people in their 40s, maybe in tech, in their 50s, in other fields where they know they're going to be targeted when there are layoffs because they have a big salary and they want to position themselves to keep working because they have a lot of energy and life in them and ideas. So they might start a side hustle, maybe doing some consulting or something on the side. So it's more security because they still need or want to work. And then you sometimes have retirees who have a pretty long lifespan now who finally made good on all their obligations. They paid off their house, their kids went to college. Now they finally have the freedom to start a business. These are the people when I do live events that come. Those are the primary audiences for the book. I mean, some of the people are the startup crowd, and it's almost like a way station where it's a small group of founders and maybe it's a one-person startup or a two-person startup, but they don't intend to stay that way for that long.
yeah, yeah.
Although, what I will say is now because of AI, the headcount in many businesses is much leaner, so they may end up staying at a very low headcount compared to 10 or 15 years ago.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually an interesting wrinkle because it almost is like even easier to scale, as a solo or very small business from just because of the explosion of AI and other tech tools.
It's a beautiful gift for people that don't have access to capital. There's always two sides to every trend. So the bad side of AI is that if you are heavily emotionally invested in having a corporate job, it makes it even less likely that you will have that because the jobs are getting leaner. So who will have the jobs? It will be the people that can manage the few people on the skeleton crew and then all kinds of AI apps and tools without going completely nuts. And then you'll have the people that are entrepreneurs though on the other side of the trend who now don't have to have a banking relationship, don't have to break into the chummy world of venture capital to raise funds. They can make up for the fact that they don't have the money to run payroll by using AI where they would have used a person. And then finally, when they get the cash flowing, if they need to hire a person or two, they can do it. So it's kind of a game changer for anyone who really didn't feel confident that they could raise any kind of funding. So it will shift the players in different fields, but I think there will still be a lot of opportunity. The thing that we'll all have to think about is how do we stay on the winning side of this trend and not just be reactive to it and let others control our future. Because if we're placing our future in corporate, what I hear, and you've probably heard this too on the earnings calls, CEOs are now getting kudos for saying that they're growing without adding people. That's the
Yeah. Well,
writing on
that's
the
yeah.
wall. Wall Street is rewarding them for doing that. So they're going to do it more and more. if you're planning on your current situation continuing, it won't. They don't want it to. This is not the way things are going, but you can start a business and use AI to jumpstart the business and put yourself on the winning side of the trend. I don't really see many ways as an employee to do so, except if you're one of those multitaskers who could handle the job of 30 people with AI and all the people and contractors and everyone else working for you. You might be a winner, but I think the number of those people will be smaller necessarily because of the nature of the whole trend.
Yeah, that does, and less chances even to become that person. I am curious about that because you mentioned you speak to a lot of retirees or like early retirees, kind of like adapting to what life is going to be outside of the corporate world. Like for me, I always say that like I always knew I need to go out on my own because I'd look at the people who were my bosses and I never wanted their job. Unity, I always wanted to be like my own thing, but for those who are sort of doing it come, near retirement or retirement, that's probably not their incentive. They probably never really had a strong desire to do that. How much of a mental adjustment is it to go from longtime employee to, you know, really trying to build something that can sustain?
What I see is people are very ready for it because they have many years of experience building connections, knowing how to do things. They may have some savings. And people want to stay active longer for reasons like brain health. They like the social connection. So generally, when I see them starting a business, they're very ready. Now, what it's not really that compatible with is a stop and start lifestyle where someone goes to Europe for 3 months, then restarts the business, then goes on another trip. I think in early retirement, a lot of people really wanna get those trips in. That's not a good time to start a business because you really need continuity. You don't have to work on it full time. You could work on it 20 hours a week, but a concentrated 20 hours. Because when you're doing outreach to people to market your services, you need to be available. You don't wanna get back to them in 3 months when your trip is over. So that's the one thing I would say. Other than that, I really don't think that there are many drawbacks. The only other possible issue is health, where if you're not in good health, you have to attend to that first because it will be hard to work if, you're running to a lot of doctor's appointments and things. So that's why I always tell people really prioritize exercise, eating right, just the basics. I don't think it has to be that complicated. All the things that are in your control without being fanatical, because that gives you a lot more options than you'll have if something creeps up like diabetes because you've developed type 2 because you're not eating quite right. Luckily, a lot of these things are reversible. So if you have good health practitioners, you can kind of get yourself into the fighting shape to start a business so that you have the energy you need. It also saves money. I mean, as you know, as a financial planner, what's the most catastrophic thing in America? It's having giant medical bills that make you go bankrupt. And so you want to avoid that at all costs because our system is very cruel to anybody who has a health problem. And these things can sometimes just come out of nowhere through no fault of our own. So the more we can do around the things we can control, the better our finances and our ability to run a business.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest, when I went solo, which I did a couple times. I would say that was the best thing for my health because I had a little more time to go on walks with dogs or, first thing for my health was having 2 young children. That's been killing my health, and particularly my second. But, yeah, uh, the good news is, like, you may focus on your health for the first time when you go on your own because you're gonna have a little bit more gaps in the day just as you're building that business.
Research bears you out, Ryan. The MBO Partners State of the Freelance Economy comes out every year, and they find that consistently freelancers rate their health as better than they worked in corporate. Just think about commuting, how
Yeah.
unhealthy it is. It's so stressful. You're just like sitting on a train. you can't really do anything while you're in there because you're packed in like sardines, or you're in your car fighting traffic, getting really stressed out. I'm talking about New Jersey or New York, so maybe people in
Yeah.
other parts of the
Oh,
country
no, I mean, I grew
aren't
up in
feeling
Dallas, and my
the
parents
level of it.
commuted an hour
Uh,
away, so yeah.
yeah. So I think you'll definitely have a big step up. It's also that you control your food intake because you can make a healthy lunch at home. If you're eating out, it's just never as healthy as when you're eating in your own home and you know what ingredients go into things. It's much cheaper too with restaurants
Yeah, it is.
costing what
Yep.
they do today. So it can help you build your kitty for your business. So I think on every count, it's healthier. Plus, you have more time for social life, which is good for your health because you're not stuck on a train canceling dinner plans at 8 p.m. because you're still in Newark Penn Station or wherever you
Or
have to
or
change trains.
or you're actually seeing people you wanna see versus, like, a sales call, which or, like, a sales appointment or, meeting with, like, executives, which is, like, social in the sense that you're meeting people, but you're not or, like, solo lifestyle, you can actually take time for the people that you want to and to spend time with.
It's true. And what I find is I actually see people a lot, even though I work from home, because when you're growing your business or you're just keeping your network alive with your professional friends, it always makes sense to get out, have a cup of coffee, have dinner, go for a walk, whatever it is. I mean, that's how I learned about ChatGPT. It was a mom in my neighborhood who her daughter was friends with my 2 twin daughters, and it turned out she was an expert on ChatGPT, so we would go on these walks in the early morning to get exercise, and she was talking to me about all the interesting things that she was doing, and I had not used AI yet, and I learned all about it from her. That's how we learn because there's no MBA course in being a freelancer. We really learn by osmosis, and then we get these social connections too, which really add so much to our lives.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm curious though, because you talked about when your journey was starting, how, yeah, I mean, it happened fairly quickly for you in terms of like sustained success. But was there a point or a moment that was particularly like a hurdle that you kind of had to overcome in the process of transitioning to working for yourself?
The big one was health insurance because most people don't realize that when you have to pay health insurance premiums for a family, it probably costs as much as your mortgage. And I had not been aware of that until I had to pay it. And so I realized all of a sudden those benefits are very valuable. At the time, my husband was a freelancer too. And so we had no access to a group plan. So that's one thing to think about, maybe to get a part-time job where you have access to health benefits or join the freelancers union or something where you can be part of a group plan because that's a very big cost and you're going to have to make it up from somewhere. I remember my daughters always saying, "Mom, how come we have 3 girls in one bedroom and my friends all have their own room?" And I said, "It's because we have to basically pay 2 mortgages, not just one." But my friend who's the banker said, "Well, Elaine, can you afford to pay it? And are you benefiting overall? What are you netting from freelancing?" And I said, "Well, I'm basically much better off because I worked from home and my husband and I juggled the childcare. So we had no childcare costs because of that. We did have to coordinate closely, which is also a huge cost that can be as much as a mortgage, especially if you have 4 children. And so I basically had time wealth and time control. And those are things that I think are really good for your mental and physical well being. There are actually studies that show that when you don't have control over your time, you're at much higher risk of problems like heart disease. And so I always had to make the adult decision. Okay, my child has to go to the urgent care. Well, I'm going to have to change around the client meeting, maybe get up at 4 a.m. to finish a report. But it's up to me to decide that rather than asking a boss if I can do it when I knew I had to do it as a responsible parent. But the company would be dinging me hypothetically if I kept doing that. And as you know, if you have more than one child, they don't all get sick on cue. If one child gets sick, it rolls through the family for a long time. And
Yeah,
that was one factor for me with freelancing because I didn't wanna have to keep asking and be the one who was generating the eye rolls. "Well, here she goes again, another kid is sick. I mean, how committed can she be to this job?" I just didn't want that stress, and
yeah.
I think there's a lot of working parents that are dealing with that. And to be fair to the companies, they're doing more with less. And so they do need some people there. So they can't always accommodate the way we would like. And sometimes you get people that are just unsympathetic to families, and it's not a family-friendly workplace. So there's a lot of different factors that we all have to weigh. For me, dealing with the stress of uncertain income, which is a real factor, was worth it. And I just lived below my means. I tried to always live 20% below my means. I drive an old car now just to give myself that freedom, and I have no car payment. I try to look for ways like that that really don't matter to me. Now, if I loved cars and I was a car person, I was going to feel terrible driving a 2014 Ford Flex, then that would not be the right choice. But I invest in other things that do matter to me, and that's part of it too, is just being discerning
Yeah,
about it. Because for me, the value of control of my time is worth more than money. And
agreed.
that's what you have to decide. Are you going to sell your time to a company that controls it, or are you going to own your time, but also own the problems that come with it, which sometimes are challenging, like during COVID or the Great Recession. Those are really serious issues, so you need savings, etcetera.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, one of the big hacks in working for yourself is not to both you and the partner go solo at the same time, because you got to let one you use one for the health insurance and then the other build the business and then vice versa. So that is incredibly impressive that you and your husband were able to manage that uh, both at the same time, because that is a exorbitant bill in the end. So that, I
It is
mean,
big.
yeah.
But it can work for a single person too, because I got divorced 2 years ago, and I'm a single parent
Oh,
now.
I never knew.
Yeah, I did, and it's worked out just fine. I've really not seen any change because of all the changes I instituted in my lifestyle early on. I just kept doing them all these years and understood that I didn't have a corporate job, so I always saved money and I always prepared for things going wrong. And,
Yeah.
of course, it's discombobulating when you have a major life change. But I basically am still standing, and my kids are in college. It didn't interrupt anything. I'm really grateful that I learned those lessons early, because for everybody, you don't know what life is going to bring. You could be married and have a partner who can't work anymore because of a health problem, or any number of things can happen. But I feel like the freelance lifestyle is a great training ground for the unpredictable and the unexpected. And once you live your life that way, knowing you don't have control over everything, you'll make very different decisions. And those are often the decisions your financial planner would recommend anyway. And I've always had good financial planners, and I feel like they gave me such good advice all along on just living in a way that was sustainable. That's what I would say, is always think about the word sustainable, because in freelancing, sometimes you'll just have these bonanzas, right? You make a big sale for a big project and it just feels like everything is going up. But then there are things that impact the budget to your clients that can come out of nowhere. And so you can't count on windfalls propelling you. You really have to have the underpinnings of um, of a sound financial life in order to keep this going. But for me, it was always worth it. Even though I never really liked doing it, I did it because I always thought about the love I had for my children and how I wanted to be with them. And I would really make any accommodations to have that. That was my priority. And I'm not criticizing anyone who likes to work in an office, because some people, their job has to be done that way. If you're a doctor, I'm very
Yeah.
grateful that you're there in the office, that I can come and see you. This is just what I wanted personally.
Yeah.
Um, but I was willing to understand what it took to maintain a sustainable lifestyle as a freelancer since 2007, and I'm still going. I don't have
Yeah.
any plans of getting a job anytime soon.
It's fantastic. I have two more questions. This has been a great conversation. In terms of the solo lifestyle, one thing I talk about is you need outlets, because like otherwise the job can like overtake you because there's no parameters that are inherently in place. So I'm a big like cinephile movie fan, and that's one of like my outlets. What are your outlets? Is there a piece of media or outside outlet that really you look forward to and helps you sort of motivate you?
Number 1 is hot yoga. I go to hot yoga almost every
Nice.
day. It's really the best therapy for me because it's so hot in there that you cannot think about anything else. If you try to think about a freelance assignment, you'll just collapse because
That's
it's
the
hot.
only type of yoga I can do is
Oh,
that
really?
for
Well,
for that same purpose.
it's filled with freelance professionals, by the way, and, that's a great thing. I walk a lot, my friendships, I have so much gratitude for my friendships, and I try to talk to my friends regularly. A lot of them are spread out, so we talk by phone, my children, and, gardening. I have a patio garden at my townhome. I had to bring the whole thing inside because it's freezing, so I've gotta figure out what to do with all these plants, but
Yeah,
no, but those are my things. It's really important to have things that are not at the computer, I think,
I
because
think so
a
too.
lot of the work we do is on a screen, and it just isn't good for your mental health to be on there all day long. And I think it's really important to protect your mental health and the need for social connection. I think we all learned that after COVID, and you do have to make it a practice and really think about it. That's why I do yoga in the studio instead of conveniently doing it on Zoom. Here and there, I'll do it on Zoom, but it's good to just be around people, different people than you see every day, and to just have the stimulation of human connection.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's actually funny how things change as like because obviously I've had a big career change in my life. And when I was a writer, though, one of my favorite things to do was to cook because when you're writing, you're always kind of coming up with things on your own. Whereas when you cook, there's recipes. And so like I didn't have to like think about what I do. It was just like very like set there for me. And I always really appreciated that it was like a very good like de-stressor and now that I don't have to do that, cooking is less exciting to me now because of that. And I think it's because of what I'm doing throughout the day is different than what my night is like. So, anyways,
That's a
uh,
great tip. I love cooking too. I was never a very good cook. I never really learned how to do it, but I got a fleet of slow cookers. I say a fleet because I really do have a fleet. And I started cooking in that, and it's really nice because you can take 15 or 20 minutes at lunchtime and put some
yeah,
stuff in, and then your house smells really good. It smells like a homey smell, and you eat much healthier. And I joined something called the Purple Dragon. It's like a fruit and vegetable co-op. I'm sure they have different ones in different cities, but I get all these vegetables and I have to use them up. And they were rotting in my kitchen, and I decided, I'll just cook the stuff right away and then put it in my freezer or whatever. So it helps me in terms of just planning meals and things. Because as you're on deadlines as a freelancer, sometimes that creeps up on you, and then you're ordering DoorDash and things, and you're
exactly.
not eating
Yeah.
healthy, and it's expensive, and blah blah blah. So I agree with that tip wholeheartedly.
And last question I want to get to is sort of like any advice that you would give someone going out on their own, like if you wish you had this type of advice when you were first starting.
I would say cultivate your freelance buddies. Early on, I met Elizabeth McBride, who I think you might also know, who's another finance journalist. And we had a business together where we were doing larger projects, and we both had young kids at the time. And we would run things past each other. Different things would come up, whether client negotiations or a difficult assignment or whatever it was. But we were kind of living a parallel life. And it was really helpful to have a sounding board of someone that I really trusted. So I would say find those relationships and develop them and make time to nurture them because it can be a little bit lonely sometimes as a solo, especially if things are not going well. And when you have freelance buddies, you'll see them all the way through. I actually am involved with a project with her now, and our kids are both in college, and, it's been a long time, but yeah, that's the number one thing I would say.
That's great. Great advice. Where can people find you if they're interested in connecting?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X under my full name, excuse me. I have a cold. And or they can go on Instagram under $1 Million One Person Business. I do write back and really welcome hearing from people. It makes me a better writer and journalist. So feel free to send a connection request. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, I would double down on the LinkedIn because Elaine sometimes puts out calls for sources and needing sources, and if you're in that sort of industry that she's looking for, like she'll definitely talk to you. So that would be a great place to connect with her. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you being here, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It was great to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Thinking Solo. I'm Ryan Derousseau, fee only financial advisor at Thinking Cap Financial. Uh, Make sure to subscribe. And now that we're a few episodes in, please comment. Let me know how things are going or what you want to see. And I will talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye.